The way we lead impacts the way people live. This world needs truly human leadership. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. Thanks for listening. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. You can connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, and find our podcast articles and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. You're listening to a Truly Human Leadership podcast refresher, where we reshare insight from podcast episodes from the past. During his tenure, Howard Behar was president of domestic business for Starbucks and the founding president of Starbucks International. When he started, the company had 28 stores, so saying that Starbucks experienced rapid growth during his tenure is an understatement. But most importantly, Howard was the driver and steward of the servant leadership culture that now helps to define the company. He's the author of 2 books, The Magic Cup and It's Not About the Coffee. And on this podcast, Barry-Wehmiller's global messaging leader, Mary Rudder, and I talked to Howard about his time at Starbucks, but also about a wide range of topics on leadership, including leadership at Uber and Lyft, Amazon and Whole Foods, the gig economy, millennials in the workplace, and Howard also gives his advice to aspiring leaders. Throughout the podcast, Howard uses language very similar to Barry-Wehmiller CEO Bob Chapman. In fact, when Bob Chapman gave his TEDx talk in 2012, he started out by saying that there was a crisis of leadership. And Howard starts off talking about the crisis in leadership right now.
Well, number one, we're not thinking about who we are as human beings. We lead. Many people tend to lead not from their values, but from their wants and their desires, and that really screws everything up, because then it's not truthful leadership, and they don't build trust. And the number one thing that you have to have in any organization, whether it's a family or whether it's a for-profit, not-profit, whatever, any organization, is you got to have trust. And so trust isn't developed when people lead from their desires, from their wants and the things that they want in life versus leading from their values. And I do judge how people lead. I'd be lying if I didn't say I don't. But I would rather have an honest asshole than a dishonest good person. You know what I mean? And because at least I know who you are. And so, it's like what I tell young people. I said, if you're going to go to work for an organization, you have to start with who you are, not with who they are. And you figure out what your values are and how those values translate into the actions and the decisions you make in your life. And then you look for organizations that reflect those values, your values, or you reflect theirs. And, a lot of people worked for Microsoft in the early days that weren't very nice people, and yellers and screamers, and it was all about them. Now, fortunately, it's changing there, but at least be honest about that. And when you have that, then everybody's on the same plane. But when it's dishonest, right, that breaks down trust. And so, kind of that's the basis of what I'm talking about. Let's, look at Uber, right? There was a guy that didn't understand his real role. He thought it was to bring technology to the taxi business, but he was really using technology to help people create better lives for themselves through, using the taxi business or that model as a way to make a good living and to have control over your own life. If you take Amazon, for example, Amazon uses technology to create great transactions, fantastic transactions. They're the best at what they do. It's not about people with them. It's about transactions. Uber, it needed to use technology to create better relationships. And he didn't understand that. And when you look at what their values were and the things that they wrote down that drove them, it was so different. I mean, it was, it was dishonest versus a Lyft. I mean, there are two distinct leadership models, Lyft and Uber, both in the same industry. One, everybody loves, the other one, everybody hates. So, and he wasn't honest. The guy that was running Uber was dishonest about, what he was trying to do. He was talking this good story while he was cheating in the background, while he was breaking laws in the background, right? While he was abusing his people. Unfortunately, he paid a price, fortunately. That's the great thing about the internet. You can't hide. Anyway, that's kind of the thrust of it.
We can't hide them nowadays. Then you can really find out what a company's values are.
Yeah, and not just what they say, but what they really are. There's always a gap between what we say as individuals, who we are, and how we act. And that's the same in organizations. And what you try to find are organizations that are closest to what they say they are, act in a way that they say they are, so that you can have an honest relationship.
You've very well known as being associated with Starbucks for a long time. These thoughts that you've had around this crisis in leadership, where did you start thinking about this stuff? Was there an epiphany you had at some point, or was it just accumulation of experience? What kind of triggered this kind of thinking with you?
Well, it began in my mid-20s when, I had innate relationship skills. It was just family of origin stuff or whatever. But they were, the term unconscious competent. Okay. So I was an unconscious competent. And I won't go on the whole story, but through some pain and agony, I got interested in who I was because I never really thought about it. And that put me on a journey of self-discovery, of identifying what my core values were, what my mission in life was, how I wanted to live my life. And once I got competent about that, then I started to get interested in what made other people tick. And so I went from an unconscious competent about self to a conscious competent about self, and that journey took me on a journey of becoming a conscious competent on what makes other people tick. And that started to really form who I was as a leader, because now I was intentional about it. And so I got interested in Robert Greenleaf's work on servant leadership at a very early stage, and it was in the early 70s or mid 70s. And, and I said, that's what I believe. But I never had any words to describe it. And he gave me the language. And then everything else has been proving out the ideas. How did they work for me? Because, you can read all of Greenleaf's work, but until you internalize it and make it your own, or Drucker's work, you got to make it your own. It can't be their work after a while. It has to be yours. And so that's what I tried to do. And I found out over time what worked and what didn't work. And when Starbucks came along, I was in my mid-40s, so I was, I was pretty well formed. My values were formed. I knew what I believed in. And before I went to work for Starbucks, I had written down all the things that mattered to me in my next career, what I wanted to do, and what kind of organization I wanted to be part of. And I was able to put all that into work at Starbucks because it was so small. And I was the one that really believed at the time, it was a small company really focused on coffee. And I came with this idea that, the coffee had to be good, but we were really in the people business serving coffee, not in the coffee business serving people.
How were those ideas accepted when you came in there thinking that? At
the beginning, not so well. I mean, they were they were, but not so well with management, with leadership at that time, not because they were bad people. It's that, when organizations entrepreneurs start a business, they tend to be focused on their product or service, and that tends to be everything. And they don't think about it in terms of once you hire one person, then it becomes about people. And in a very short time, we were able to focus it on that. And I coined that phrase. It's not about, we're not in the coffee business serving people. We're in the people business serving coffee. And that is stuck to this day. And it sounds like just a small play on words, but it really set tone and direction.
So you really were in on the ground floor. Like, you didn't really have to turn anything around it other than more like pointing something in a certain direction.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, it wasn't a company in crisis, although it had problems, like all organizations do. We weren't making money and et cetera. But and the people were hungry. And Howard Schultz, he was kind of different. Howard was tougher on people than I grew up in a kind of a soft and gentle home environment. I was the baby of 3 children, I was born 10 years after my nearest sibling, and my dad was 50. And so it was different. Howard Schultz was, born into a family where he was the oldest, and he was kind of emotionally abused as a kid. And so he had he kind of came with that set of experiences. But over time, he got what it was really about, and he was the one that was totally focused on the coffee, but he came to realize it was about people.
Beliefs are one thing, Howard, values are one thing, but deploying them, like deploying that throughout the organization, even though Starbucks was small, how did you guys go about that?
Well, first of all, you had to decide who you were, what you wanted to become. And then you had to practice that, and you had to hold people accountable. So very early on, we did work with Jim Collins. This was before his books Good to Great and Built to Last came out. And because we were struggling, we were starting to grow fast, and after even when you're small, you can kind of lose track of why you're there. And so we did that work. We did the core values work, we did the BHAG work, mission work, and we did all of that, and then we wrote it all down. And probably one of the singular most important things that we did was the BHAG. And our BHAG was this. We wanted to be one of the most well-known and recognized organizations in the world, known for nurturing and inspiring the human spirit. And, we didn't say anything about coffee, nothing about how big we wanted to be, but well-known and recognized, but known for nurturing and inspiring the human spirit. And that drove the business, and we held ourselves accountable for it. And our first guiding principle was we treat each other with respect and dignity. The last one was that we recognize that profitability is essential to our future growth and success, but it's not the driver. And so those things written down, and then we held ourselves accountable to it. They weren't in books. They were everywhere you went. If anything's worth doing, it's worth writing down. And so we drove ourselves by those things. And it was hard to get fired at Starbucks. It was almost impossible to get fired if you're missing your numbers. But if you messed with the people, it was easy to be out of there. And it didn't make any difference what level you were at. If you could have been an executive vice president. If you abused people, you would be talked to, you would be helped. But if you couldn't make the adjustments, then you didn't have a job. And, on the other hand, if you missed your numbers 3 years in a row, we would still help you. As long as you treated your people well. Didn't mean we didn't have to perform. We did.
Do you still think that holds true today? The fact that, is it as you've grown and grown and grown and grown? Do you still feel like the culture is as intact as as you've grown on scale?
I think that yes, for the most part, I think it is. I think that there are some things that have given way, with size. I think too much focus on performance in getting into the minutia, and it kind of takes the humanity away from it. And so I think that's part of it. But I'm proud of it to this day. I've been retired for 9 years, but, and I know what goes on there because I hear about it all, and, I hear some stories, and, it's not a perfect place by any stretch of the imagination, but in comparison to most places, it's a great place. But I think they're constantly trying to make sure that they live up to the values. But I think, one of the problems with being a public company is that, you can, if you're not careful, you can start to lose track of who you are and think that you're about being a public company. And so that always can cause some dissension. But I think for the most part, they do a good job.
One of the things that you were just talking about was, profits, the drive for profits. And, a lot of people, we hear this a lot, people want to say, a lot of people who have very good intentions want to say that it's culture over profits, or culture over business. Culture is the one thing. One of the things we like to say a lot is that you have to have a sustainable business model.
Yeah.
Or you can't have any people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, I mean, they go together. It's not either or, it's both. And you got to perform or you don't have a business. You don't have anything. And it's exactly, we don't like that word performance. We don't like to be measured. And I don't care whether it's performance at home. My job's to take out the garbage. If I don't take out the garbage, I hear about it. No matter how much my wife loves me, if I don't do my chores, it doesn't, things don't work out so well. Or whatever I've agreed to do, And it's the same in organizations. So you got to perform, but it's not what keeps you together. Taking out the garbage isn't what keeps our marriage together. And the same at work. Making huge profits does not keep a company together.
Yeah.
And how does this, in today's economy, where everybody is, there are so many people that are, freelancers and the gig economy. I mean, how does that impact things? I mean, we have fewer people that actually are, committed to the company, and they're more committed to just they're bringing home a paycheck. How do you motivate those people to feel like they're part of that shared vision?
Well, let's go back to Lyft and Uber. Okay, they're both exactly the same business, the same business models, everything. Get in an Uber car and ask the driver how does he or she feel about Uber, and many of them, by the way, drive for both. And then ask them how they feel about Lyft. You'll get a night and day response. Now, that's a gig economy, right? They eat what they produce. So they feel completely differently about the companies. And they feel attached to Lyft and unattached to Uber. Yeah, not everybody. I'm making a broad generalization, of course, but I've done enough of it now and tested it enough that look, the gig economy is the same. People want to belong. Even if they don't go to an office every day and part of this team that they see each other every day, they still want to belong to something that's bigger than themselves. And it's leadership that makes that happen. Look, there's lots in Seattle where I live, we have lots of technology, so there's lots of contractors, work for Microsoft, work for Amazon. Well, it's up to Amazon and Microsoft to make sure those people attach in some way or another. And if they don't, shame on them.
How many times over the course of your career building these types of cultures, how many times did you face resistance? And how did you handle that?
Well, you're always facing resistance, right? Look, I made this theory up, probably somewhere somebody's done it because there's no new ideas. But there's 20 to 30% of the people in an organization that if they caught the CEO on video taking money out of the till and having an affair with his administrator or her administrative assistant, they would say, no way would he ever do that. It would be on 60 Minutes. They'd have all this stuff, right? And they'd still say, nah, he would never do that. Then there's 20 to 30% of the people that if they saw the same video, they saw or the CEO was putting all their kids through Harvard, bought their parents summer homes, and gave everybody lifetime retirement benefits, they'd say, what's in it for him? No trust. And then there's the 40%, 40 to 60% in the middle. They kind of move around. And all organizations are kind of like this. And if you think about politics today, today's political world, forget about who you like and who you don't like, right? I mean, no matter what Trump does, he can, honest to God, he said it. I could walk down in New York down Park Avenue, shoot somebody, and they'd still love me. And there's some people that, that no matter what he does, he'll always hate him. And what's amazing, it's about 30-30. When Nixon was in the White House and they were trying to get Nixon out, there were still 30% of the people that loved him. And so leadership's job, look, the worst, let me tell you who are the people that hurt you the most. They're the people that, they look and say, no, my leader would never do anything wrong. They're always living in this world of make-believe. And they never challenge you. They never challenge the organization because everything is perfect. Give me the people that are always kind of on the edge and let me manage them. It's not easy, but let me manage them better. And because they're the ones that'll move your organization forward. Now they can do some damage too. And so you've got to be really good at leading that group.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're passionate. That's why they speak up,
But a lot of leaders don't like those people. They want the ones that come and tell them how handsome or beautiful they are today and how great they are and how wonderful they are.
You see a lot of, Starbucks obviously is a very high-profile company. We've talked a lot about a lot of high-profile companies. Whole Foods is a high-profile company. Do you see this servant leadership mindset getting better in businesses? Or do you see it's kind of the same maybe than when you started out? Or what are you seeing in the landscape right now?
No, I think it's getting better. I do. I think, and I think a big part of it is just awareness and that you can't hide. Somebody's mad, they get on the internet, they write something. That's how the guy at Uber got caught and his people got caught, the sexual harassment, they couldn't hide. And so, there's some pluses and minuses to that, but give me that any day of the week over being able to hide. But no, I think it's better. I do. I have a lot of optimism about it. I think particularly millennials, they're aware, they understand, they're a little thinner skinned than we were, but
we're not millennials, you're safe. We're not millennials.
No, I say it to millennials.
Yeah, no.
But it's but I'm a believer. Raj Soda, we've talked a lot about this. And I see it all around.
Yeah, we do too. And I think it is going in the right direction. Yeah. There's enough people that have really been talking a lot about it, and we have a bigger platform thanks to social media. And I think now it's just a matter of actually, most organizations want to be that way. I mean, they know it's ultimately good for business, but it's the challenge, and that what we're doing now is trying to help organizations actually, create the processes that drive it deep into their organization and make it part of the DNA, not just the beliefs of some leaders who are, obviously walking the talk. You still have to have a process to deploy.
Yeah, once you get big, or significant size, you have to have the processes to hold it accountable, to it. And that's what ultimately what makes it work.
Yeah, it's interesting to think, when we think about Raj has talked a lot lately about the Whole Foods Amazon deal. And Raj really believes that the Whole Foods being incorporated into Amazon could be an amazing thing for conscious companies because it could completely change Amazon.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that.
It remains to be seen. Clearly.
Zappos, the same thing now, but he's allowed Zappos and Tony Hsieh to run it like he wants to run it, and so they've held it. But at the end of the day, we'll see. I think Amazon's getting better. I think they're more aware now, but it's a different kind of culture. It's a performance culture. It's where Whole Foods, was more of a people-oriented culture. And, there'll be some healthy things that happen to Whole Foods, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to what you said earlier. You can't hide anymore. And the more people hear about things that might go on in Amazon, the less they would want to do business with them. And I think I think there have actually been times where things like that have come up in the media recently, and Amazon have done some things to change that. And as they get even bigger than they are now, maybe that will be the impetus, catalyst for more change too.
So when someone comes to you and says, okay, what should I do? What do you say? You mean
to get there? Well, number one, tell me show me your 8 to 10 core values.
How do you you're a young person comes up to you and says, well, I don't know what my values are. How do you do the discovery on that?
You got to go to work. It's hard work, but it's simple to start it. You got to go on the internet and you got to look. There's lists of words that represent human values, and pick, and you start to think about those. And believe me, it is hard to get it from 300 down to 8 to 10. Your core values. A book I like is The 7 Habits by Covey. That's good work. And he basically, that's where he comes from, and or he came from. And but the way I didn't have Stephen Covey, so I found a little book. This goes back, I can't believe that it's almost 50 years. And it started, the first chapter of the book said, identify your 8 to 10 core values. And it had 300 words that represented human values. Some that, that we wouldn't all say that they're good human values, but they're still human values no matter what. And so I went through that. It took me about a year to get through it. And I quit a few times, but I got down to my 8 to 10 core values. And then it said, you have to take those 8 to 10 core values and you have to define what they mean to you. So if I said my first core value happens to be honesty. So, all right, that's a word, but that's all it is until you turn it into action. So what are the actions that make me an honest person? What would the actions be that would make me a dishonest person? And you have to write down how you want to live that word honesty. How it will inform the actions you take and the decisions you make in your life. So, and you do that with your 8 to 10 words, and each one will have its own. Because if I asked the two of you, are you honest? Both of you would tell me you're honest. But if we got a little deeper, I'd say, okay, what would you tell me a white lie about? Each of you. Have you ever told your spouses a white lie? Or have you ever not said anything and just let omission be the lie?
Usually about what I've bought on Amazon recently.
Exactly. I was going to say about something I've been shopping. Honey, is that new? No, I've had it for a year.
Yeah, exactly. And so, all right, so we all have our ranges of what honesty means to us. So it's how we practice. So if your husband or wife came, you got married and you found out that your husband or wife, they were shoplifters, could you live with that? You love them for everything. They're wonderful people, but they like to shoplift. And no matter what you try to do, they just, they won't stop. So, honesty is your core value. Can you live with that? Well, so you got to do that work. So, and you define them, and then you have to have a personal mission. In those days, nobody talked about mission statements for companies. This was almost 50 years ago. Our mission was our budget, and our financial plan. And so, I worked on mine, and it changed over the years. And my mission goes like this, and I copied it. I plagiarized a lot of it from Starbucks. I want to live my life every day, nurturing and inspiring the human spirit of myself and others. And the reason I say myself is what I've learned in life. If I'm not okay with me, if I'm not nurturing and inspiring my own spirit, if I don't love myself unconditionally, it's very difficult for me to do it for somebody else. So then it said, write a paragraph or sentences or words of how you want to live your life. And so I came up with my 6 P's. The first P is everything I do in my life has to be with a purpose greater than myself. It has to have meaning to me, and you can find meaning in anything. A widget maker makes a widget that goes into a printing press, that gets sold to a publishing company, that produces a newspaper or magazine, that gets delivered to somebody's home to inform or entertain them. That widget maker has a purpose greater than themselves, all the way to helping somebody learn or be entertained. Now, some people have easier connections, nurses, doctors, etc. So then the second P is, if I have a purpose greater than myself, then I damn well better be passionate about it. And passion means I'm putting all my energy into it. I'm screaming it from the highest mountaintops, mostly to myself, but I'm still screaming it. So it gives me that energy to do that work every day. And then the third P is persistence. Anything worth accomplishing, you have to be persistent about. And there's lots of rocks in the river in life. Most of them we put there ourselves, but sometimes other people put them. How do you get around them, over, under them, through them, or how do you blow them up? And how do you stay with it? And then the next P is patience. I'm an A-type personality. I didn't learn patience until I had grandkids. And they taught me patience. But you got to have patience with yourself. Not everything comes in the time frame that you want it. And then performance. Performance does matter. You either get the job done or you don't. And no excuses to yourself or others will make a difference. And, we're getting measured all the time. Are you both married?
Well, I soon will be.
Significant other in your life.
Yes.
So performance matters, doesn't it?
Sure.
I mean, what you commit to do for each other, to love each other, to have a monogamous relationship. If you don't want to have a monogamous relationship, don't promise it, don't get married. But that's part of performance, doing what you say you're going to do. And we get measured every day. I tell, and we may not get an annual performance review, although I think it might be funny, right? Some night what you ought to do is go to your significant other, your spouse, and buy a really expensive bottle of wine on the way home and get a couple of those really $90 Riedel glasses. And when you walk through the front door, say, hey, honey, I've got your favorite wine. Come on in, let's have a glass of wine. And as she sits down or he sits down in front of you, say, honey, this is your lucky day. This is going to be your annual performance review. Now, you've done some things well this last year, but there's some things you really need to improve on. Well, as your ass is bouncing out the front door. But performance matters. It matters at work. It matters at home. And then the final P, everything we do in life has to be about serving other people. So when you ask me what I recommend young people do this work. I have a piece of paper sitting in front of me. I carry no matter where I go. It's on my iPad, on my iPhone, and I have it typed out. It's Howard in 50 words or less. It's a picture of me in words. My mission, my core values, and how I do everything. And then, of course, I have a plan. At 72, amazingly enough, I still do 5-year plans. What I want to accomplish, what my goals are. So, that old adage, if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. Well, that's it. So where do you want to go? Where do you want to go as a human being? Who are you? How does that translate in how you will be as a leader? And I used to share this with the people that reported to me so they knew who I was and they could hold me accountable, because we all get off track,
So what do you think will be the one thing that puts everything over the hump? Is it the next generation coming up? We talked about how millennials are a little bit more amiable to this type of leadership? Will it be another generation coming up to, put most of the major companies over the top, or is it something deeper than that?
I don't know what will put it over the hump. I think, well, it's just more people wanting to live their lives like this. And, and that's just going to take time. And, I'm not naive enough to think that this is going to be universal. It's not. It's, what we can do. I say if I can change one human being, in a lifetime to make them be thoughtful about their lives and how they lead and to affect that kind of change, that's enough. Hopefully I do more than that, but you see it, when that is, what it will be, I don't know. I'm hoping that maybe the political discourse that we're having now, it's so mean and so off track that maybe people will finally say, we're not going to live like this anymore.
Don't forget to find us and connect on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller. And you can find more podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening.